This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host, Josh, and with us is your other host, Puka. Say hi, Puka.
Hello.
What are we talking about today, Puka?
Inside you are two wolves. One is Fianna. The other is Fianna Revised. Because those are the two books from which we're going to consider excerpts today. I tried to do like a slightly wolf-like greeting as well. I don't know if that worked.
I missed the gift that lets you crawl inside somebody and hang out.
I did not even notice. Was that a thing? I didn't know that was a thing.
Okay, because you said about inside there's two wolves.
Oh, I see. Yeah, pop culture references. Yeah, the Fianna, also known as the Fianna or other pronunciations.
Not the Fiona, which is
No. Similar origins, though, etymologically, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I dare say the most fae-inflected of the werewolves, though not the only ones, but I didn't really want to get into how the Get of Fenris will fuzzy chainsaw every she they meet.
Yeah.
It's just not a very deep story. They didn't like being used as steeds. Who knew?
I mean, you could argue that the ones from the Americas could be fae-inflected, depending on your definition of fae. But
that's true. I mean, certainly probably more fae-allied.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So we've done like crossover book deep dives-ish for mage, wraith, and vampire. And so it felt like we should do a werewolf one. And I can't remember, because we did our crossover episode with Josh Heath quite a while ago. Have you done Changeling werewolf crossover stuff?
I've played in it.
Okay. Me too, but only once and not exactly.
Yeah. I played a Red Cap. And it was a mostly werewolf, mostly Fianna game, and it got weird because the ST and the players were like, "Oh no, yeah, we love the Fae," and I'm like, "I'm going around eating vampires." It's different.
I had a Bastet Fairy Hunter for a one shot, which was quite grim, like who hated the Fae. But nevertheless, the opportunities are there for synergy because we have the Fomorian-Fomori connection, the focus on stories and legend. I would say also Changelings and werewolves are probably the two main splats most interested in preserving nature, like as a general rule.
Yeah.
But the Fianna, like I'm going to be saying Fianna and correcting myself multiple times. the F tribe in particular, because they are repeatedly said in the books to have these connections, not only because their name is very close to Fianna, but because they also have they derive it from the warrior bands of Irish folklore, particularly the ones in the mythological cycle known as the Fenian cycle, or the Fianna cycle. Finn McCool with his famous oracular thumb.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, like the way that they do this kind of thing, it was like vampire was the most ridiculous because that came out first. And you're like, why are these people vampires? These like historical or mythic figures. And then werewolf does it. You're like, sometimes you're like, well, it might have been better in a different spot. And then, yeah, it's like Changeling got the slim pickings. But
Mage had a few head scratchers. Wraith, it makes sense.
Yeah, Wraith's like the right point.
Yeah. Well, Changeling, at least, I think, has always been good about casting famous individuals as dreamers rather than full fae. I think that I can live with. But yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with the classic Fenian cycle or other bits of the Irish folklore, I do recommend checking it out, like the stories of the band, the stories of Ossian, the legendary bard. It's all like feats of strength and quests and very Irish Argonauts kind of stuff. Quite interesting. So we're looking at both the second edition Fianna tribebook and the revised Fianna tribebook, kind of the greatest hits that are Changeling relevant. So we don't need to get into like umbral business or how they win renown or whatever. But do read the entire books if you want to include some of these. Shall we dive in?
Sure.
All right. Fianna tribebook second edition, written by Harry Heckel and published in 1995, which we touched on way back in season 1 when we talked about White Wolf books that dealt with the Fae before Changeling the Dreaming. And I was really excited to see that the illustrations in here were done by Tony de Terlizzi and Richard Kane Ferguson, because they are two of my favorites.
Yeah.
Also solidly represented in Changeling.
And for those following along at home, Drive-Thru RPG lists it as the first edition.
Oh, does it?
But it's the 1994, right? I'm not looking at the...
Yeah, I guess it is. I thought it was like January 95 or something. I looked on the wiki.
The published date copyright on the things, 1984 at least.
Yeah. The important thing here is that the original Fianna tribebook came out before Changeling the Dreaming existed, and the revised one came out basically after it ended. So very different points in time, but pretty similar perspectives to an extent. So in this first one, such great art. I love Tony Charlie's art. Chapter 1, The Song of Our Tribe. Here's where we get a history pretty steeped in fae matters, which we're encouraged to take as true because Fianna Galliards are the second only to the Silverfangs in ancestry, and they are the best at reciting lineages with their bardic traditions and whatnot. So they know their history. I like the note that they claim to have let out the capital letter first howl, which woke the fae, with whom they interbred and hung out platonically in equal measure. Interesting side note, they consider King Arthur to be a Garou story as well.
Yeah, it's going back. Let's make everything a bit werewolf.
Yeah, but given the Arthurian roots of Changeling, it's like, okay, connections. Mm-hmm. They kind of play fast and loose with the timelines a little bit because they talk about the fae in pre or early historic times, like they've already been fleeing from banality across Europe. They talk about the Impergium as happening after they reached Ireland and started hanging out with the Celts, which seems out of order to me because I thought the Impergium was supposed to be like, I don't know, 10,000 years ago or something.
Wait, which the what? Oh,
the slaying all the humans.
Yeah.
Sorry, how much werewolf lore are you steeped in? I'm uneven with it.
Same.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, is he pronouncing interregnum weirdly? And no, you mean the Impergium.
Well, yeah. Maybe between the two of us, we can make like half of a werewolf storytelling.
Yeah, because that is supposed to be like crazy long ago, and I thought it was more than 10,000 years ago. Like it was.
Yeah.
It was like
deep prehistory.
The cause of their equivalent to the mists, the delirium, right? Where, like, all humans have this ancestral memory of how horrible werewolves are because of the horrible things werewolves did to humans. So, like, that would have to be a very long time ago. So,
yeah. Certainly longer ago than the Celts reaching Ireland.
Yeah.
In any case, there's other stuff in here. There's a great sidebar about using poetic descriptions and place names as code language to kind of direct each other to where they need to go. And throughout this episode, I'm going to be like specifically pointing out things that I think can either connect to Changeling or be ported wholesale. And that's one of the latter. I would love to see this as like a thing that you should do. Yeah, you need to get to the Freehold, make a left at the place where the battle between the trees and the storms felled the troll who blah, blah, blah.
See, that kind of reminds me of like, you're like, oh, turn left at the Pizza Hut. And by Pizza Hut, you mean the sushi restaurant that used to be a chicken place. Anyway, sorry.
That's kind of how my mom gives directions.
Yeah.
Either way, a mix of both, perhaps. There's lots of grandiloquence in here, just to be expected about them being the great warriors and stuff. Talk about being open about their nature with their kinfolk, especially those who turn out to be verbena mages. So we also have some mage crossover in here. The first big, like, really important to the Fae section is on the Fomori Wars, which reads like a werewolf's take on the War of the Trees between the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann, followed by some Irish mythology greatest hits with like Nuada and Lu and Bress and Balor, all these kind of big names from the legends, which we've seen on the Changeling side. So here it's just kind of recast through this perspective. I think they're saying Lu is a werewolf, which is kind of interesting. Founder of House Balor, also a Fianna werewolf. But I think this works for me. People talk about the unreliable narrators of World of Darkness books, and I think there are times when it works well as a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
So whatever the, quote, truth might be for your individual game, seeing the points of divergence here for Garou and Fae in terms of sharing the same legends, it's interesting to kind of see how that works.
Yeah, it would be incredibly, honestly, unrealistic for them to have a very similar accounting that matches up perfectly or whatever, I think.
Yeah. Getting all the different points of view doesn't necessarily give you the true story, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, after those wars, they talk about the departure of the Tuatha and their oath of alliance with the Fianna, the coming of, in succession, Rome, the Saxons with the Get of Fenris, and the Normans with the Silverfangs, And all of that is sort of against a backdrop of the tribe evolving its different branches with different approaches to protecting the British Isles, because they see themselves as being entrusted by the Fae to protect them. And the rest of the history section is like, that's in the background against the backdrop of the history of the British Isles writ large. So Irish emigration is in there, world wars are in there. But yeah. My takeaway from this, as presented, the Fae and Fianna ties are mostly framed as legendary more than contemporary, rooted in epic history.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and I mean, because it's before Changeling, it's hard to present an ongoing affiliation with like concrete stuff.
Yeah, if they threw that in, it would be wrong because it wasn't finalized Changing the Dreaming yet.
Yeah, all the Fae had done at this point were like shown up as weird earth spirits and or abduct Malkavians to fairyland or whatever.
I think there was that one in one of the Wraith books.
Maybe.
Where they had like the issue liking to hang out in the underworld or something.
Well, and it makes sense for a historical presentation like this. But moving forward, as I was reading through this, I was like, okay, well, as we get into the modern, here's how to play one in the modern day, is there going to be discussion about Fae blood within the kinfolk, like every generation of fairy is born or something? I would have also loved to see allusions to, I guess, naturae in werewolf terms, the nature spirits, but you could also say inanime in the Industrial Revolution, because like that's something which I feel like they would have cared about. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But alas, none of that was in here. Well, that's pretty much the important stuff in Chapter 1. Chapter 2 immediately dispelled my notion that we would get notes about Fae-kin, because it's just kind of like, we have kinfolk. They're cool. But we do then get immediately some notes about their camps, which are in a werewolf tribe, the subdivisions, and one of which is the Tuatha De Fionn, the children of Finn. I'm just going to read it's like 3 sentences. It says, the Tuatha De Fionn consider themselves distant relatives of the fairies. They make pilgrimages to the Arcadia Gateway in the Umbra every 7 years, where they meet with representatives of the lords and ladies of the Fae. The Tuatha De Fionn are the best loved of all of Fianna by the fairy court. They know many secrets of the changelings, and some Garou say they have the power to use fairy magic. This camp also holds to some of the oldest Celtic traditions, including many long forgotten by most Fianna. So we do have this distinction here between Fae and changelings already in the mix, when there's like no actual data yet in the game line for what that might be.
No one was going to call Changeling at that point.
Yeah. There's also a quote here from one of the camp where he says, if we wish to remain strong, we must revere our fairy heritage. We are cousins of the Fae, and together with their magics and our strength, neither weaver machine nor worm monster can stand against us. Respect the old ways, they will serve you best. So, sure. There's an interesting note here about their spirit patron, Stag, how Stag was revered by the Fae before he chose the Fianna as his children. We don't really get rules in Changeling for the Fae, besides the Nunyehi and the Menihone, to have patrons. But I wonder if there's an opening for that in some way.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
It feels like tying into the, we did the interview when they took Land of 8 Million Dreams and made it.
Oh, Shenfen.
Yeah. So like that seems like if you're going down some of the stuff from there, that would make a lot of sense to incorporate.
Yeah, because I mean, the way that the patrons are used, and you'll notice I'm not using the term that's actually used in the book. Patrons in Changeling are not handled great, but I was going to say, expanding it to Kithain, could it maybe make it more universalized? But I don't think that would necessarily make it better or worse.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is probably a question above my pay grade.
Well, you get the whole, when you start really getting down that, like, even if you're just playing a Nunnehi or Menehune game, like, the relationship between the dreaming and the Umbra and all that, and chimeras and spirits and all those kind of, like, we've hashed out the metaphysics a bunch on this. There's still a lot of, you basically are going to have to house rule a whole bunch of mechanics around that, whatever you decide anyway.
Yeah.
Because there's just, regardless of what you say the metaphysics are, the rules aren't there. So we'd have to figure out a lot of things.
Yeah, I just like the idea of Stag being, watching over a motley.
Yep.
And the elephant in the room here is how in Werewolf 5th edition, they changed the name of the tribe to the Heart Wardens. Heart as in a deer thing.
Yeah, 5th edition's a whole other.
Yeah, we don't talk about 5th edition.
Yeah, that we don't know what Changeling would be if it happens in that. So,
Anyway, let's talk about moots instead.
Mm-hmm. That's the best place, I think, for your Changeling Werewolf crossover.
Absolutely. So for anyone who is not familiar with Werewolf, these are the gatherings of the Garou. And in the case of the Fianna, they vary, but are apparently the best parties of all the tribes, organized by a council of song, including bardic-style competitions, and it specifically says in this older book, this is a time when they commune with the fae, so built-in opportunity for a crossover hook, especially with the so-called Great Moots, which are aligned with the festivals like Beltane, Samhain, etc. Imbolc is called out in particular as a time when the Fianna visit the fae and the Umbra for advice. So obviously you'd have to revise that with respect to Changeling the Dreaming. The better Imbolc connection might be to align with how the fae use that day to rekindle balefires. Get some Cairn Freehold cross-pollination action
Yeah,
going.
you could have like trusted packs or septs or whatever being invited to certain freeholds or something for a thing.
In Book of Freeholds for C20, did we have mechanics for beefing up the strength of a freehold?
Yes.
Like stoking the balefire?
Yeah, there was all that.
If you could do that to a cairn, that would be cool.
You might, in theory, be able to have a cairn that's also a freehold, but that's a whole other.
Well, when we get to the revised book, the Silver Tara cairn, I suspect, is kind of like along those lines. But we'll get there. Chapter 3. Just love the opening art for these chapters. I think because it reminds me so strongly of the Kith portrait openers for the Changeling core book. It's just like these character portraits. But
I mean, that looks like a fae.
yeah, exactly. This is where there's really not much fae stuff in here besides some comments on like where the Fianna are found and their opinions of others. As to be expected, they're most populous in the British Isles, with many in the tribe considering Ireland their true home, and the US, particularly in areas with lots of Irish heritage, such as Boston. There is a Cheers cairn, which I thought was hilarious.
I almost went there when I was in Boston, but it was like the lineup was huge.
I did a moment of silence at the statue of Quaker martyr Mary Dyer, but to each their own. And complete tangent anecdote, Boston Common is the first and hitherto only place in my life where I have seen an albino squirrel. I almost like followed it to whatever dream realm it was headed to. Missed opportunities.
Well, another missed opportunity in this book is that they really should have listed places in Canada for with huge, like
fair,
both Irish and Scottish and whatever. Like Ottawa is a huge Irish place, and most of the East Coast. Anyway.
I have to wonder from the editorial side when they would do these books that in some way touched on like other parts of the world. What was the actual directive? Because sometimes it's clearly someone who has lived in the place or visited it extensively. Clearly it's sometimes cribbed from whatever travel guide they could check out at the library. And sometimes it's just like, yeah, I've seen a TV show set there.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe there was no editorial direction. But there is a note about vampires in Boston getting, quote, phase struck when trying to attack the Garou there. So you can mash that up with, I think it's Dark Colony is the vampire Boston book, and then Freeholds and Hidden Glens has a Boston Freehold. Obviously, the Arcadia Gateway gets a mention. I don't think we need to go into their opinions about every other tribe. They get along with Bone Gnawers, tolerate a couple of the others, and are basically not into the rest. But they do get along with the Verbena, and the section on fairies pretty firmly says that the tribe should stand by them, even though the Unseelie can be dangerous. And then the appendices, where we get crunchy powers. There are a bunch of items in here that could be fae connected, but don't have to be, like the Gas Flaw. There's another bunch of items that do call out the fae specifically, namely the fairy lore knowledge, which, as in other early fae lore builds, it's not really Kithain aligned. It's more like this Ars Magica Arcadia concept. But I do like that fairy food is a specialty in this instance. So you could have a Fianna participating in a Kithain feast scene, or vice versa. The gifts that we get that are potentially taught by fairies include Fairy Light, which basically makes a glow bulb, Luck of the Irish, that lets you spend a point of Gnosis to re-roll a roll once per scene, which is pretty good for a level 2 gift.
That actually makes more sense in C20 with the weird. Yeah.
And then Ceobra's Tongue, which reduces the appearance of a worm-tainted target. And I know that the so-called fairies that would teach these are not changelings, But I still like the idea of a changeling showing a Garou how to do a cantrip, which then their patron lets them internalize as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
So like Fairy Light could straight up be the Soothsay, the Seer's Wisp. And then among the fetishes and talons, the magic items, there are cool bits like spirits bound into knotwork or into tattoos, but maybe more directly useful for the Fae are the talon brews the werewolves make.
Mm-hmm.
These include Gaia's Best, which induces sleep and dreams filled with pleasant memories. There are other less wholesome ones, but I could see House Darren getting in on this, brewing them in their cauldrons. There's also another appendix that has sample characters, one of whom is the Fae-struck Garou. She saw the Fae during her first change. She's been to the Arcadia Gateway, and she believes their magic will help defeat the Worm and Weaver. It's a little bit on the nose, but oh my god, this is the best character art in a while.
I think on the nose is fine for these type of characters. I mean, it's better than why is this even in this book, which we often get. So.
Yeah, true. And obviously she is a member of the Tour de Fianna camp. The last little bit I wanted to call out in here is that there's the story of Cuchulainn through a werewolf lens at the very end of the book, which I thought was cool. So yeah, this initial presentation, they seem very Fae forward, even though this predates the release of Changeling, so there's no hard mechanics to build on. Given the Irish forward nature of the tribe and their overall temperament, I would say the obvious allies are probably Cluricon, she of the more martial houses, notably Duran, and satyrs, maybe wilders in all cases. They're a mix of bards and warriors, but I think a more interesting team up would be like with a knocker. Like a Fianna and a knocker working together could be a really fun combo. So any thoughts on this book's take before the next one?
It's kind of, because it came out before Changeling, it's like, it definitely mentions the Fae a lot. Would not be anywhere on my main go-to of looking this up for even Fianna Changeling crossover game. Like it's but it's a good starting place, I guess.
I think it's good for getting some of the kind of like the vibe of the werewolves themselves.
Yeah, if you're going to portray, actually, would be if you're portraying Fianna werewolf NPCs or something like that, or a player who wants to you're in a Changeling game, but you're playing a werewolf and you want to like see what your people think of the Changelings.
Yeah, and one of the things that second edition, or whether you want to call this first or second, kind of had going for it is because it didn't have the weight of other books. Like, it does feel a little bit more free-floating. There's less meta plot. Not that I think you need to use the meta plot, but in the revised book, it does kind of affect the tone a little bit, and it affects the kind of information you get. Here, it's much more, let's just crib everything we can from Irish myth and contextualize it within the game and throw some Fae in. It's a lot more haphazard, but it still gives a vibe that I like as an underlying layer, if that makes sense. But yeah, we could talk about the revised one.
Yep.
And let's start with this cover with the most strategically placed stag's head. More importantly, there's all these little Luna moths flying around the werewolf subject.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
Whether or not that was intentional, I'm going to read it as such. Very evocative. And definitely an improvement on the second edition cover, which was just the tribe symbol on a background.
But also the name, Luna Moth, I mean.
Yeah. Good call, revised artists. So this is by Forrest Marchinton, can't remember which it is, who helped on Dark Ages Fae, and Adam Tinworth, published in 2002. Definitely had more expectations that we would see more connections to the meta plot of Dreaming in this one, given the after the game timing for this. So once again, highlighting the bits that are relevant for our purposes. Chapter 1, The Song of Stag's Children, is the history again. The thing with revised era splat books, for anyone who hasn't read them, they had more page count, so they had room to get more expansive. With the history chapters in particular, they're overall much more rambling, but also more detailed and evocative, I would say. I don't mind that. It's good stuff. Not always accurate, but there are, as with last time, many Garou-centric elements, like the Impergium and the War of Rage, but with more detail born out of the several years of book in between. Otherwise, there are 3 new notable bits of Fianna mythology which I wanted to call out because I think they would interest the Fae. First, They believe that the Tuatha and the Fianna are descended from the twin children of a werewolf forebear getting it on with Celtic primal earth goddess Danu. So there's that. There's a sidebar about Celtic culture also that basically says it's way more diverse than you probably think it is. Go do some research, which is true. And, that's helpful for anyone who wants to delve more into the culture that underlies that stream of changeling lore.
Although also if you're going Celtic, going all the way back, a lot of this is way outside this remit of, it's like Europe all the way to China kind of thing.
In that instance, I recommend Calvert Watkins's How to Kill a Dragon, which is a comparative mythology and linguistics book. There's also a casual reference to were-otters, which needs to happen. I checked with Josh Heath. Apparently no one's done it. I'm going to get on that.
Oh, they actually make a lot of otters are scary, man.
There's a friend of mine. A friend of mine once said that he identified with otters not simply because of his body type as a label in the gay community, but because he liked to crack open the heads of his enemies on his belly, which I think that needs to be the root.
You're talking sea otters. I'm thinking river otters are even scarier.
I mean, any of the above. They just imagine them in their war form.
Yeah.
Scream!
I don't want to face an otter in its lupus equivalent, like animal form, for that matter.
Anyway, back to this canonical material. The second bit, we get a recounting again of the War of the Trees between the Tuatha and the Fomorians from the perspective of the former's Garou allies, plus a sidebar tale which suggests that the Tuatha had to leave Earth so that the Fomorians couldn't return. Which I feel like we've seen that idea before, but I can't remember where.
Yeah. I know some of the late end Changeling stuff actually had the Tuatha leaving, and then another war between the Kithain and the Fomorians happened. So,
yeah, it might have been like Dark Ages Fae, which had the same author. Actually, now that I think about it. So,
okay.
And then the third bit, we do get the shattering described here from the Garou perspective. They mentioned the collapse of the Trods, whether those were paths of Balor to their bits of the Umbra, or earthbound ones that connected freeholds with cairns. And they kept faith with the commoners left behind as the Sidhe escaped. They honored the old oaths, and broke up a few fights between rival fae who came to them for refuge. So, There's also the repeated call-out of Tara as a meet spot. So that is the historical center of kingship in ancient Ireland. More historically cited compared with the second edition tribebook, there's a lot more about the expansion of the Celts across Europe, followed by a lot more about Rome, and comparatively less about the Saxons, the Geta Fenris, and the Silver Fangs. But also a call out to the Irish monks of the Dark Ages, who wrote down and thereby preserved a lot of the island's mythology that Changeling leans so heavily on.
Yep.
Christianized, of course, but still valuable. And then the rest of the history doesn't really deal much with the fae. So I was surprised there wasn't really anything about the changelings among their kin who emigrated in the 1800s, because that would have been well established in this book compared with the other one.
I do feel like Werewolf in general needs to do. So what happens when your kinfolk doesn't go through the first change, but instead a chrysalis? Like, that feels like a thing werewolf tribes should be dealing with on a semi-regular basis, enough to address in a book.
Yeah, I mean, especially then. And I'm really surprised there's nothing about the resurgence, because you'd think that would be a big deal for them. Anyway, it ends with a timeline that sums up a lot of these points. Anything noteworthy that we should talk about before moving on?
Not really. Like I said, it's not even as much as...
Yeah. I don't want to say we're scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to...
There's a reason we didn't do this in season 1.
Exactly. Yeah. So chapter 2 gets into the society and culture, and once again, there's a voice to the narration. We start once more with information on moots. A lot more emphasis on whiskey-fueled dance partying than in the last book, but also a ton more information on the cross-quarter festivals. So Beltane is particularly called out as a time to invite Seelie guests, and Samhain as a time when they formally fought the Unseelie. But there's enough here that if you wanted to use one of these festivals as a crossover scene, you can look for how the traditions of Garou and Changelings align or don't.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think, especially in the modern day, they should be like inviting certain Unseelie to moots in Mount Samhain. Maybe not the Shadow Court ones, but the ones who want to anyway.
Yeah, the monkey wrenchers.
Yeah. Or just the partiers.
Usually it's both. So then we go through the auspices and the breeds, and eventually we get to the camps. Once more, we get the Tuatha De Fianna. There's more concrete information here than the brief second edition write-up. Notably, they specialize in making the most of the Werewolf Fae Alliance, though details about what that looks like are slim. They are the smallest camp. You can't join. You can only be recruited on the basis of Fae blood or madness.
Mm-hmm.
They learn Fae lore, and they must visit the Arcadia Gateway before dealing with Fae on Earth. And it's unclear whether they know the difference between, like, the Fae who are in that realm versus the Changelings. Because the Arcadian Gateway Fae are, like, true Fae who never incarnated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird they'd have to meet them first. But
well, I mean, you want to know where they all came from.
I guess meet the worst before you meet the rest. And then they're also the ones who deal with other supernaturals, so this is also your grand crossover opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
The narrator here points out that the tribe as a whole knows and works with the Fae, but don't trust them. So that's mainly offloaded, like the whole dealing with the Fae, into the Tuatha De Fianna camp. If you want to include a Fianna in your game, they're the most feasible option.
Mm-hmm.
So skipping ahead through the Garou litany and the Where's the Tribe Around the World biz, we get a whole page on Silver Tara, the tribe's most sacred cairn and the ancient seat of Irish kingship. I don't think we actually got much about it in Court of All Kings, about Tara as a concept, but this is the namesake of Tara Nar, which just means New Tara. There is exhaustive detail about the layout of the complex and celebrations where the Fae are often present, basically begging for a storyteller to use this for a story arc. And they mention that the new Ardri, which is the High King of the tribe, Bron, has welcomed in many Fae since his accession, and he's taken on a troll bodyguard named Nile of the Hundred. This could be an easy way for a motley to hook into a werewolf story. If you have a troll, have them have an oath to the Fianna that's mostly off-camera until the tribe needs to call in a favor, or needs extra muscle for their moot, or whatever. This is also, I suspect you could say this is a place that doubles as a freehold.
Mm-hmm.
Moving through all the stereotypes to the very end of the chapter, here we get much more extensive opinions on the Fae than in the other tribe book. And they're not just lumped in with the other supernatural types. They get their own section. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
The narrator here is one of the Tuatha De Fianna, and her key advice is keep away, which may come as a surprise given how Fae-steeped the tribe's lore is, but it's a really nuanced take. Because aside from the usual Fae are tricksy and unpredictable bits, the narrator emphasizes the discomfort of dealing with changelings who seem more human than Fae,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly more so than the true Fae of Fianna legend. And then there's this very practical, we can't afford to lose any of our tribe helping with their battles.
Yeah.
Like, damn.
There was also the bit about like dealing with a changeling who doesn't say it, but like they're going through the forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
Like that,
Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't know why they're doing that, but that we can't trust them if they're going to suddenly forget about everything.
Yeah. And the converse of that is she also talks about werewolves seeking into Harano as a result of adventures with the Fae.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read the last bit of it here because I think it's good. So it says, they're unpredictable too. One day they'll be swearing undying oaths of kinship and loyalty with us. The next, they won't recognize us and will deny any knowledge of Garou, Fae, or anything but the human world. So why do we keep mixing with them? Well, we really thought the old alliances would hold. For a while there, they were very interested in the Fomori, thinking they were something to do with their ancient enemies and ours, the Fomorians returned. Then, all of a sudden, they decide that that's not the case and withdraw. Like I said, unpredictable. It feels to me like they're enjoying one last party before the end of the world comes. Once upon a time, we really believed that our Fae cousins would walk onto the plane of the apocalypse with us. I don't think that will happen now, and that's a real damn shame. Ugh. It's like staring time of judgment in the face.
Mm-hmm.
But she also does have maybe one of my favorite characterizations of Seelie versus Unseelie, which is apologetically or unapologetically dangerous. It's like, it's not quite light and dark. It's not quite selfless and selfish. Yeah, this is what they are. So, like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's interesting bits to work with here. What did you think of this chapter?
Yeah, it feels a little bit more like I can sink my teeth into it, but it's than the equivalent in the other book. But yeah, it's not a huge difference, I would say, in terms of the actual, like, yeah, the Fae section's better, I guess.
Yeah, richer at least.
Yeah, it's all both of these books so far. I mean, I'll talk about it at the end of the book. But.
Okay. So then the fun part, chapter 3. This is for character creation, and so therefore the crunchy bits. So there is useful narrative guidance at the front as well, the front side. So with backgrounds, given that allies and contacts often include kinfolk, you could have one who's also kinning to create a vector for crossover. And vice versa. I mean, Changeling has contacts and allies in the player's guide if one of them is a Kinain who also turns out to be a kinfolk.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's a sidebar in Celtic languages. I was so excited. Once again, a fairy lore knowledge. Do you ever use... I know we've talked about this, but do you ever use secondary abilities in a game?
I try not to. I haven't done that so far. I more think... Like, I try to think of, okay, what are the useful abilities that would cover things in this chronicle? Mm-hmm. And make sure people have access to it. And that might not be the same as what's on the default sheet. Okay. Especially if you're doing something not standard for Changeling, such as crossover. It doesn't have to be that. But, like, I don't want to just... I find usually with secondary abilities... Like, sometimes I can look at those and go, no, this is a primary ability for this chronicle. But otherwise, I'm like, no, don't bother putting dots in it. Like, maybe you know that thing. Like, wrestling, I would not. I cannot think of a... Okay, I can think of a chronicle. I can't think of a chronicle I would want to run where wrestling makes sense to have on a character sheet.
Street Fighter, crossover edition.
Yeah, well, I was thinking WWE.
That would be interesting though if you had like a Street Fighter style game and it was just everybody had different fighting styles.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right.
Yeah, I wonder if only White Wolf. If they should have published such a game. You know.
Mm-hmm. But so for a crossover, if you knew you were very intentionally doing a werewolf changeling crossover, would this be something you'd be more likely to have as an option?
The fairy lore knowledge. Maybe, or maybe I just, have like a mix of... I might have like a combination of two abilities. One, which is just kind of like your knowledge of supernatural stuff, and then potentially a werewolf could learn Grey Mary from their Changeling best buddy player characters. But that's more the route I'd go.
The book does specifically say taking this knowledge doesn't mean your character has read the Changeling the Dreaming core book. This is a good note to have. Getting into the gifts, they've kept fairies and fairy spirits, which are distinguished as separate things, as possible tutors, like teachers of these powers. So I'm not sure if fairy spirits are meant to be the chimera, or I think they call them like Kimmerling. Yeah, Kimmerlings in Werewolf.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know if there would be actual humanoid changeling spirits, akin to how we had mage chimera, if the Umbra has like the other direction.
Yeah, there's some spirits that make me go, especially like in C20 covers this, where you're like, I don't know how I square this circle, but like, I do like the idea potentially of some spirits also being chimera or fae or something. Mechanically both somehow. I don't know how I'd make that work. But there's certain things where you're like, oh, this kind of makes sense. Is either you have to make two different beings that are very similar and would chat with each other all the time and have the same name, or you need something that's kind of a hybrid or something.
You have like the gatekeeper of the Path of Balor saying, have you met my brother, the other side of the gatekeeper of the Path of Balor?
Yeah. Either that, or you have this one being that like is both chimera and spirit in some way.
And one of them always lies, and one always tells the truth.
How do you know that if you're asking them? If the one that says one of us always lies and one of us always tell the truth, right? Either that one's lying, or that one's the truth teller.
Anyway, so the gifts that can be taught by the Fae here include the same Fairy Light one that we got in the other tribe book, Fair Fortune, which is a renaming of the Luck of the Irish one. Probably a good idea to rename that.
Yep.
And Forms of Kernunos, a level 5 gift of animal shape changing, either of the self or against others.
I would treat that as like, if you have that, there's certain cantrips these correspond to. It's like, maybe like you have a changeling who knows that cantrip could just teach this cantrip to the werewolf, and that's the gift they get.
Yeah, and then you do the Sword in the Stone thing and make a musical montage out of it. And this being revised, all gifts also have Mind's Eye Theater write-ups. Were these useful back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, technically the crossover game I played in was Mind's Eye Theater, but not a LARP. We used it sitting around at the living room. It was strange.
Well, as a non-LARPer, we had a word for it, which was padding. But I'm glad it was there for those who needed it. After that, we get the rites. These get into a lot more detail than in the other tribook, including mechanical effects for the cross-quarter rituals. And I don't think there's anything stopping changelings who participate from getting the benefits here. So like extra temporary stamina, strength, etc.
Yeah, if you can spend your gnosis somehow.
I mean, I guess just swap in glamour.
Yeah.
And the other rights throughout here could be the basis for fun challenges in a moot scene for a crossover game. So imagine a Puka up against a Fianna in the right of boasting.
Yeah, I feel like if I was rewriting World of Darkness 6th edition or something, like I could just have rights as just be a thing that anybody could in theory take, but some of them are only known by certain groups.
I think literally at this point, now that Book of Grimmare has been published, I think every splat has... Well, actually, I don't know about Wraiths.
I mean, they even have humans having some of these, and some of them in Wraith and Demon. There's a few little thingies. It's not rights. It's not a party based, but it's not social based.
Yeah. Going through Chronicles of Darkness, it's always interesting to me going through the rule books, like the core rule book for Chronicles or New World of Darkness, because it is technically mortal themed. Mm-hmm. There is supernatural stuff in there, and you're like, okay, these are mortals doing this stuff. So I like that.
Yeah. I just like a place of just a right that anyone could do. You do it right, and it happens.
Do the right.
Yep.
Moving on to magic items. Only in Werewolf can you get the line, the Fianna's interest is not limited to their own fetishes. They discuss their fetishes like people discuss sports, at great length and greater detail. Keep it classy, Werewolf.
Pretty sure. Yeah, I mean, they could have put that in one of the Unseelie books, for sure.
Yeah. So the directly relevant ones we have here: the Spear of Len, a fetish which repels magics that muddle the senses or lull one to sleep, particularly fey ones. The Threefold Axe, a fetish forged with iron, silver, and gold to do much aggravated damage against everyone. And Royal Mead, a talon brew made from honey collected from bees in the Arcadia Gateway, which tastes amazing and gives night vision. The bees bit is in one sidebar here, and then another points out that because these brews do not require gnosis, anyone can get the benefits. Mm-hmm. So changelings must spend a willpower to do so, but it's not treated as a toxin with side effects for them as it is for humans. Shout out also to Andrew Goodman's Roots of Legend for brewing mechanics on the changeling side, if you want to have a shared cup between friends at your crossover moot. Then some more spirit patrons. Some significant ones from Irish myth and Fey lore include Morrigu, the three-faced mistress of battles. Her Fianna followers get along with the Korax Werecrows, but I would say also Redcaps for sure.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that likes heads. And Redcaps have crow energy.
Is Epona from Celtic mythology?
Yes, I believe she was Gaulish.
Okay, now I have that song from Zelda in my head.
Oh, well, there's also the Enya song. Okay. Maybe it's the same one. Maybe Enya wrote for Zelda. That would be great. The other one here is Danu, whence the Tuatha De Danann get their name. Mm-hmm. She grants the ability to sense Fae and their energies to her werewolf children. And it says that most fairies, including many changelings, presumably Kithain, will recognize and honor those who follow her. But I'm not sure how they do that. Like, does the sensing work both ways? I don't know. I guess if you ken them.
Is Danu, like, in terms of what actually any sort of records we have from back then, like, basically just Tuatha De Danu is, like, all we get on her? We're like, well, yeah, basically, it's a feminine name. There we go. That's it.
No, I think that's really about it. Like, it's clear that she was some kind of mother goddess. Yeah. But as far as I know, that's it.
Well, there's a ton of religions where that are gone, like where we have writings and we're like, well, this was a all-father type person from this whatever group. We don't know anything else about him, but he was nobody said really anything about him, but his name was used in names, but like wasn't really part of any sort of rituals that we have any record of.
Again, I point people towards Calvert Watkins because this is all stuff that's in there. Comparative Proto-Indo-European mythology. Mm-hmm. Awesome stuff.
I was thinking of a Semitic one, but I wasn't.
I wonder if they could have a true fae as a patron. Founder of House Gwydion.
How about a nymph?
Yeah. So then we get some merits and flaws. Here we have the yes again, but also an oracular form of second sight and the useful seldom sleeps merit, both of which are said to be a product of some fae magic in the blood. The latter could make a good Kinain merit.
There's a friend of a show that says he has that merit, but anyway.
I've evolved not to be seldom sleeps, but to be like shallow sleeps.
Yeah.
And I think that just comes with co-parenting a cat.
Oh, yeah.
The chapter ends with a few spirits, including a banshee, a bit more approachable than the imagined ones we got in Nobles the Shining Host. Still not friendly, but they're set to keep an eye on families with the ancient blood.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps some distantly related Changeling and Werewolf could find themselves both dealing with the same Banshee. Also, the Salmon of Knowledge is in here, and that's one of my favorite mythic figures.
Mm-hmm.
Any favorite bits of crunch in the mix here?
I have trouble wrapping my head around werewolf crunch in general.
I mean, I love the bruise. I love that that's a thing, because there's such a rich space for players to invent on the basis of that in collaboration with the storyteller.
They do have the tattoo fetishes, and I'm like, I want more. Maybe it's because of the book series I've been reading. I want more tattoo talons. It's like one and done kind of thing.
So like you use it and it
fades away, yeah.
I could take that. The last chapter, the character templates are just no face struck here. But it also details some famous faces among the tribe, with two in particular to call out. The first is, time for the Welsh, Higwydd ab Iain, an elder of the Dinadroed in Vlythe. Say that 5 times fast.
I think I can say that 1 time slow. So.
He was a war leader back in 9th century Wales who fought to get a Fenris and antagonized his Irish tribe mates. I'm going to read the relevant story bit here. As warriors massed in Caledonia for the final battles against the Black Spirals, he secretly met with the Get's Sept leader, who agreed that there were worthier adversaries than each other. So they planned to seal the rift by fighting side by side in the far north. They were ambushed by unknown Garou. To this day, no one knows which side did it. But when the Fianna arrived, they found their foe dead and the leader unconscious and dying. The local fae could heal him, but it would take a year and a day to do so. He and his closest retainers were placed in a burial mound. It was decided to let the Get think he was dead so that he could surprise them in the future. A she by the name of Cairnhir ap Gwydion vowed a mighty oath to guard the Dun until his son Digon pronounced the magic phrase to awaken his father. The words were known to Digon only, so when he died in battle 2 months later, that caused a problem. No other knew the Rhee's whereabouts or even that he was still alive. A few centuries later, the she left the world, but not Cairnhir, who waited faithfully, his powers keeping the place hidden and timeless. But now the Fae Lord's powers are failing. The valley is being developed, and every time a new building is put up or a road improved, the Weaver drains the enchantments. He knows that sooner rather than later, people will stumble upon his place and all will be lost. Unless Fianna discovers and speaks the words of power, reviving the slumbering warriors and freeing the ancient Fae before the modern world withers him. So in the classic, old Changeling sense, this is a lost one, guarding a Garou, like an ancient war leader, which is a great hook.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that could be, even if you do show up and say the words of power, that doesn't mean the problems haven't stopped.
Yeah. Whoops. And then the other one to call out here is Ardri Bron Macfin, the mercurial new leader of the Fianna tribe, with his troll bodyguard and his bunch of changeling buddies. Many of the tribe, including one of the other notables here, the fearsome Baelai and his Stonewall pack, they worry that their leader is getting too swept up in Fae politics and lifestyles because he's focused on building and rebuilding alliances with them.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that he's just not well suited to his role as Garou leader and is just avoiding those tasks. I don't often think of Werewolf as a political game, but this could be a hook.
Yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of people trying to be together that's going to be political.
I don't recall if there's a trod or a moon path from Silver Tara to Taranar, but there could be to facilitate this. And that's basically the book. A little bit less Fae-centric than the original one, but benefits from both the larger space given to revised splat books and the more concrete info on the Fae that had been created for Changeling the Dreaming by this point. I appreciate that they took a more expansive view of the tribe's origins, though there is still some cringy stereotyping making an appearance here and there.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the second one's a little bit... I'd have a little bit more use in a chronicle for Changeling, but I mean, that it wasn't the point of I'm not going to criticize the books for not doing a thing they weren't meant to do, right? They're not... This is not the Changeling crossover book. But, like, some of the stuff, it's kind of neat, like, reasons for them to interact, like that one with that lost one. That's pretty cool, I think. But you could even change just come across this lost one. They're like, this is bad. Wait, the lost one wants us to find a Garou, find a werewolf. What the,
Yeah. So with, I guess, either or both of these books, what would your overall word of advice be to Changeling storytellers in particular who do want to use them to work Fianna or werewolves in general into their games?
I'd say really focus on them for their role as showing you what the Fianna are like, as opposed to showing you what the fae are like, if that makes sense. Like,
yes.
And the things they say about the fae go, this is how most of the Fianna think about the fae. There you go.
Which might come as a surprise to the Changeling characters.
And that I find very fun. Like when I did that crossover thing, I had so much fun around playing with that, different expectations, and my Changeling character not really understanding what the heck was going on too, and like strange conversations. And it's like, why are you obsessed with fighting this wingless dragon? Like,
we're almost like, oh, Gaia, grant me the strength. And the Changeling's like, who are you talking to?
Yeah, it's like, Gaia, I thought you were Celtic.
Yeah, there's that too. I think also, I mean, like story-wise, it definitely helps with a certain kind of game, one that focuses on the shared role of lore in both groups and the sort of mythic, larger-than-life stories. Like the revised Tribebook has an inspiration list at the end, which includes Braveheart, and they point out that despite the awful accents, the narrative of that one is a great one for Fianna. So that larger-than-life story gets depth from being plunked into the context of modern urban fantasy, which World of Darkness is. So I think Fianna working with fae, that also kind of holds true. I'm sure there are other kinds of story arcs, but that's like the one I think I would gravitate towards. There are some practical concerns, like unaddressed things that a storyteller has to hash out. We don't really get much about what happens where werewolves are enchanted, or how do you get changelings into the Umbra.
Or even the whole right thing. Like you said, use glamour, but doesn't say that.
Yeah. So a little bit more about that would have been nice. The other thing that I was like, what about the dreams of these werewolves, or like how ancestors and past lives might matter? Something I was thinking was, imagine a Fianna bloodline having rapport or beef with a changeling over their incarnations. And it's like each new generation in the bloodline, there's a Fianna werewolf with the ancestors background. And then this changeling reincarnates with the remembrance background. So they kind of keep that connection going, whether it's good or bad.
Oh, that could be cool.
Yeah.
We could also make an alliance too, especially if you do the alliance where you're like, these two people actually shouldn't get along, but they have that connection.
And you also have things like the pacts that are frequently referred to. Like we know in Changeling, you can swear oaths with the dreaming. I assume, I don't have enough werewolf knowledge to know what that looks like on the werewolf side, but there's not a lot of depth given into that in these books. Certainly.
Yeah, there is Changeling books that say werewolves have sworn oaths.
Right. So like, what does that look like? What does that mean? What's the mechanical weight of that?
Yeah. That sort of ties back to the whole right crossover thing, I think.
Yeah. Are there any other hooks or considerations that we need to think about?
I mean, this is not the sum total of werewolf changeling interaction, this tribe. Like, all the tribes can make sense.
Yeah, but this is the most fun.
Yeah. But you could do some weird stuff with glasshawkers. And bone gnars, actually, a lot of changeling bone gnar.
That's true. That was the only other time. So I've played werewolf twice. Once was as that Bastet Fae Hunter, and the other was as a bone gnar named Choose on Choose.
But just the number of changelings who end up living on the streets, too. Yeah.
Well, those are the books.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah. So if you want to talk to us about it or anything else, you can send us an email, podcast@changelingthepodcast.com. Go to our website, changelingthepodcast.com. Still the Mastodon, right?
Yes.
changelingpod@dice.camp. There's the Discord, discord.me/CTP.
Links to all of our social medias are in the show notes to this episode.
Yeah. And once again, I'm Josh.
I'm the Galliard Cusparu known as Puka.
Yeah. And remember, no matter how deep those oaths are, that doesn't stop a werewolf from frenzying and eating your face if you insult his mother.
May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be at your back. And may the... Oh God, it's got my leg!
The Kithain often turn to their resident shape-changers, the Puka, for advice on how to deal with werewolves, and the Kith has kindly offered a number of strategies for engaging the Garou. When confronted by a snarling Krynos, the correct strategy is to say, "Who's a good boy?" with the strongest chicanery unleashing one can muster, followed by a belly rub, and then trusting the mists to paper over the aftermath as you make your getaway. At a more relaxed social event like a moot or an industrial sabotage action, good conversation openers include, "So, how's old Lady Gaia?" Or, "You smell nice, have you had your glands cleaned?" And every werewolf is fond of the Puka's variation on Ring and Run, known as Howl and Hustle, where you interrupt a Garou rite with your best impression of the attendees before making a break for the nearest trod. They'll be talking about it fondly for months. Naturally, although our podcast is more oriented towards the Fae, we still appreciate all sorts of listenership, and are especially grateful for the support of our patrons, who include Bad Company, Ben the Canadian, Siglosson Jr., Derek, Dorcadus, Elorus, Henry Craft, Diabul, Oreo, Razcaboose, Rebecca P., Sandchigger, Sija, The Crew of Erebus, and Ware Buffalo. If you'd like to receive a shout-out and a complimentary mail-order talon absconded from the local cairn, check out www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. You're also welcome to leave a review on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience, or tell your favorite rage-filled shape-changing Gnosis beasts about us. In the meantime, may Luna smile upon you and Danu guide your steps as you sing the songs and keep on dreaming.